Today's podcast is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast, providing podcasters with a flat rate for ad space so you always know how much you get when you include an ad from Podgo. I recently joined as a member, and you can too. Apply today to become a member and immediately be connected with advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co at podgo.co. And when you go to apply and they ask you, how did you hear about Podgo? Make sure you tell them that the Vault Classic Music Review sent you.
There are a lot of choices when it comes to car shopping. Only Kelley Blue Book is your trusted resource for one-stop car shopping. Have confidence to price it, buy it, fix it, trade it, sell it, and love it when you KBB.com it. It's as easy to say as it is to use. Kelley Blue Book is the #1 most trusted third-party automotive site. So no matter what your it is, be empowered to nail it at KBB.com.
To show you how easy it is to file a claim with Geico, we hired a Shakespearean actor.
Oh, woe is me. Wherefore art thy claims help when I hadst a fender bender?
Pardon the interruption, but when you file a claim with Geico, your claims team will be in touch right away.
But willest they forget about me later when thou needest updates?
No. They'll always be there to, helpeth you out.
Well, I suppose that I should bemoan something else, like my lactose intolerance. Oh, whyest must dairy disagree with me so savagely?
Geico, great service without all the drama.
Welcome to the Vault Podcast, classic music reviews, presented by IV Creative. Now, here's your hosts, B. Cox and the crew.
Greetings and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Vault Podcast, classic music reviews, presented by IV Creative. It's a perspective of the classics from a fresh point of view. We appreciate you for taking your time and lending your ears to our perspective. You could be anywhere listening to anything, but you're right here with us, so we thank you. With you today is yours truly, B. Cox, and before I get started introducing our guest here today, I want to take the time to thank the fans once again for showing all the love out there. Y'all have really showed us some love this summer, especially with the bonus segments and all the reviews that we've had so far. As we know, this is a poppin' year. We've covered albums from 91, 96, and 01, and had a great number of albums from each one of those years, especially 96. So we want to thank y'all for continuing to show love from stateside and worldwide, all across the globe. We see y'all, man. Continue to show love, of course, to us on social media. And as a reminder, we got something coming up right at the traditional end of summer for the summertime. You know how it is. I got to make sure that I get something in with y'all. So make sure y'all stay tuned with that. And today in the Vault, I have a very special guest. And if you listen to the pod and follow us on social media, you know him well, and you know his show very well. If you listened to him earlier this summer, we had a great review of De La Soul, Stakes is High. I love talking hip hop with this brother, man. He has a great show as well, and definitely hit a milestone not too long ago. So, of course, I'm introducing none other than the most interesting man in podcasting, your favorite podcaster's favorite podcaster, and none other than the Miak Mac himself, the pride of South Carolina, 12 Cal, the 12 Cal podcast. Kyle, what's going on, bruh?
What up, B. Cox, man. Thanks again for having me on, man. I appreciate that intro, man. It's always good to be back here.
Yeah.
And, man, it's always good to talk hip-hop, man.
Always good to talk hip-hop, man. And Kyle's show, the 12 Cal podcast, Kyle's what I like to call a podcast OG, double OG, triple OG. And I say that because Kyle just hit a very important milestone with his show. And if you're in the podcast business, you'll be very lucky if you get, some of us maybe even the 10 episodes and really the 20 episodes. You get to 50, you got something going. You get to 100, well, you've already built a habit and you might as well keep going. But when you get to 300, it's sort of like that milestone that you get to where you've reached that one, stat of durability. Like Cal Ripken's 26-32 games played in a row, like you get like that point where you keep going and you keep going because you do what you do. And no matter what, you're going to continue to do what you do, man. So before we get started, man, Kyle, congrats on 300 episodes, bruh. Thanks for the content, man. You always give us a wide variety of content. I laughed my ass off on the Fighting in the Club episode, and I had in flashback to some times myself of fights that happened in the club. And like you, I've never been in a fight in the club, but I've been witness to plenty of fights in the club, including fights by my own Morgan State University football team and the victims that they had. So, again, man, congrats.
Man, thanks. I appreciate it, man. It's been a lot of fun. As I mentioned on that particular podcast, you don't get to 300 episodes by accident. I didn't necessarily come into podcasting with a plan. The only plan was just to, just the same thing like what you guys do on here, man. Just create dope stuff for people to listen to, and that was all my goal, and that's always been the goal, really, man. Just to put out dope content, and anything that I put out, I feel like is dope, and just talk about the stuff that I want to talk about. And I'm glad people really, have stuck to it, and I'm gonna keep pushing them out, man, for real.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yo. Again, man, 300 episodes is an incredible milestone. So congrats and keep on going. And we'll be there for 400 and for 500 should it get there, man. So we going to keep our fingers crossed. But what we do here, of course, y'all know, man, it's the vault. So we hashtag open the vault, hashtag nothing but the classics at MBTC. And I had Kyle on for this and we talked about this. I send my schedule out when I have fellow podcasters and I go out and I do solicit people to come on to the show to talk about albums. Kyle picked out a couple of these, and one of them, of course, you heard already, was Stakes is High. Came out in 96. Well, today we have another album from that great year of 1996. And this one in particular he picked, and I know we're going to have fun with this one. So we're going to go back 25 years ago, obviously, to 1996, to August 27th. And we're going to go to the second studio album of none other than OutKast, ATLiens. ATLiens, recorded between 95 and 96 at Bosstown Recording Studios, which I think is now officially Stankonia Studios.
That is correct.
Yep, and they actually bought that studio, I believe, from Bobby Brown. Also recorded at Doppler Recording Studios, Patchwork Recording Studios, Purple Dragon, Studio La Coco, Chunk King Recording Studio, Sound on Sound Recording, and just a lot of different places, and a lot of work went into this album. Runtime of 57 minutes and 23 seconds, of course, on LaFace Arista Records. LaFace, the pride of Atlanta, the pride of Babyface and L.A. Reid. Executive producers on this, Organized Noize and OutKast, and we'll actually get into that a little bit later in regards to the role that they played on this album. So 25 years later, Kyle, we're looking here at ATLiens, the follow-up to OutKast's debut, Southernplayaisticadillacmuzik, which came out in 1994, which really put OutKast on the scene. To me, I think really put Atlanta as a serious hip-hop contender on the scene, and I think also let people know a lot about Organized Noize as a production group, and then also introduced us to the Dungeon family. I mean, all staples when we talk about Atlanta hip-hop, things that you have to put in there, those entities. So this album came out in 96, and at this point, some things had happened. Big Boi and Andre had reached their level of fame. I always, point back to that, the Art of Organized Noize documentary and what happened after Southern Playalistic, how everything changed for everybody, and how with Organized Noize, they went from getting like $2,000, $3,000 for beats to the point where people were paying them tens of thousands of dollars just to come into the studio. And Dre and Big Boi had made their name. Dre went on the stage at the Source Awards and said the South got something to say, which caught a lot of people's attention and is still a highlight and a clip that gets played over and over again. But into ATLiens, a lot had happened in between then. And before we get into your take and how you, what you thought about the album, but in between this, man, a lot of stuff happened. Big Boi became a father in between this time. In 1995, his first daughter, Jordan, was born. Andre was actually in a relationship at that particular time. He was in a relationship, none other than with Total's Keisha Spivey, and they broke up. This eventually led to the beginning of a relationship with none other than Erykah Badu.
Yes.
And Andre was never the same afterwards. But they stepped into to make this follow-up album. And really what started, and with the another thing about this is that, with the first OutKast album, you could definitely tell like they were into drinking and partying and also smoking weed. Well, at this time, Dre underwent some changes. He actually became vegan and was, went through a level of sobriety. He stopped smoking, stopped drinking, and started getting into more spirituality. He started going into a period of self-discovery. So if there was like a difference between the two of them before Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music, by the time we got to this point, ATLiens, there was definitely a marked difference between Big Boi and Andre, especially in their personalities. So that's really where I saw that the contrast began. They started basically their production career here. I mean, they started actually producing on this album themselves, and also Mr. DJ, who have now been known as the production trio of Earth Tone 3. And Organized Noize produced on this as well, but some of the people involved in this, a lot of the Dungeon family, I mean, Big Gip, Cool Breeze, Timo, Cujo, Witch Doctor, Big Rube, Joy as well. I mean, and some of the main players, production players, Preston Crump, Chance Parkman, who you hear on the 13th Floor, his piano work on there, really it started a period of discovery, and also started where they wanted to show people that they just weren't a one-hit wonder. So the sophomore album, we all know, Kyle, is a very, very important step in the artist's career to be able to show that you have staying power, to see whether or not that money's going to be short or if that money could potentially be long. That's the scene right there for ATLiens. But enough from me. Let's go ahead and get into what you thought about the album. Now, at this point, you were still in school at South Carolina State, if I remember correctly.
That is correct.
And you're from the South. You're from South Carolina. You're obviously now Atlanta. You consider Atlanta your home. It is your home. Yes. So this is something that, you know, if you're in the South, you knew OutKast. And if you listen to hip hop, you know, it was a big, you know, either you or your friends were big fans of OutKast. So let's go into what it was like at them. What Kyle was listening to ATLiens going into that summer of 96, which I'm guessing at that point you're already on campus, getting ready to go into that last semester. So let us know what you think the first time that you heard ATLiens, what you thought, and then as listening to it, man, what you've thought about it in the 25 years since and how you think it stayed with you.
Oh, no doubt, man. You hit the nail on the head. I was at South Carolina State trying to graduate. Going into my last semester, you know, coming around that last 200 yards. Yeah. But it was a great time, B, man. I tell people all the time, like, not just that time of my life, but the music was just so much. And I mean, you guys have covered some of the best music to come out of the 90s, period. In particularly in talking about the music that came out in 1996. And this album was one of them, one of the crown jewels from 1996. At that particular time, man, I just remember there was a huge buzz when we knew that the album was coming, right? And it was going to be a defining moment for them because we did see, you know, their growth and their development. We did see them, you know, for some people, kind of come out of nowhere, but not for us because we saw them, you know, on Southernplayaisticadillacmuzik, but we did see them get booed at the source. We did see them, you know, really get to that point where we're figuring out, okay, where are they going to go now? We know what that album sounded, and that album was incredible, a great debut album. But like you said, there's a lot of pressure to deliver on the sophomore album. You got the common sophomore jinx, if you will, and so I just remember that summer just wondering what it would sound like. And I remember hearing the first single. I think the first single was Elevators. And I'll put it like this, B. When people, my friends and my contemporaries, when they heard it, they loved it. But when they saw the video, it kind of shook them. And I'm going to tell you why. Because if you go back to the video, you know, the video is in theme with the same kind of cartoon theme that is along with the album cover and the album insert. Back when, you know, we actually bought albums back in the day, right? CDs or the CD cover and the CD casing. And so when I think some people saw the visual, they were like, okay, well, you know, this don't look like, you know, Southernplayaisticadillacmuzik. This don't look like Get Up, Get Out. You know, this doesn't. The video didn't look like any of the singles from, you know, the previous album. So I think for some, they were a little worried. But for me, man, it didn't sound like, I mean, Elevators didn't sound like anything that we had heard before. I mean, it was funky, it was gritty, it was grimy, it was Southern hip hop. And OutKast really, you know, that song really took off. And then by the time the album dropped, I remember going to the Prince of Orange Mall in Orangeburg, South Carolina, to get the CD. I got the CD, man, and I remember, and I know you can identify with this. I remember, because remember when you would buy an album and you just want to kind of sit in silence?
Yeah.
Like you don't want to do anything. Like I literally sat in the parking lot and I sat there for an hour and I listened to the entire album in the car. No, because I knew if I took it, to my apartment, my girl would be talking, and I didn't want to do it. I wanted to be alone. I wanted to be in silence listening to this album, and I was blown away. And what's interesting is now, it's weird to believe that this album is 25 years old, but when you think about it, it still sounds and still resonates and still funky just as it was 25 years ago. It still moves me. It still makes me think. It's still there are little intricacies that I still pick up from this album, even listening to it. Yeah. And it's a part of a debate between the second and the third album, but I mean, we don't have to get into that to show this podcast. But it is a phenomenal body of work, man. And I really, it's something that, it's not, I'll put it like this. It's an album that never really left my rotation. Mm-hmm. Like I listened to this album all the time, and it still bangs, and it's still as funky as it was some 25 years ago.
Yeah, man, funky. That is a apt word. It is funky, and I mean, you knew when listening to Southern Playalistic that had a fair amount of funk. I mean, the soul on it though, because you knew a majority of it was like not even samples. It was all that was music they were playing in the studio, and they had musicians in there getting down. Put that up over some hip hop tracks and some hip hop drums. I mean, and you had a recipe that kind of hit people right in the face. So then you come back around to this, and like you said, something completely different. Mm-hmm. And different isn't bad. I had this conversation with somebody on Twitter. It's sort of like when you deal with D'Angelo and Maxwell. If you look at each of their first 3 albums, all 3 incredible albums that sound completely different from one another.
Yes.
But still all incredible. And there's no detraction to be like, oh, well, this doesn't sound like Urban Hang Suite, or oh, that doesn't sound like Brown Sugar, or oh, this doesn't sound like Voodoo, or this doesn't sound like Embrya. It was all incredible work. And so I think OutKast sort of pulls this off as we get into their catalog, that they find a way to evolve and they find a way to be able to change and adapt. And when you get the finished work, it's like, wow, y'all done did it again. And I think that's the thing that all of us were saying. Y'all done did it again. So when I rewind back to 96, as I've said many times on this podcast, at this point, heading into my freshman year in high school. Yes. And I'm at the end of my summer track season and getting ready to go to high school. And the Olympics are just really like wrapping up on television. And the Olympics that year were in none other than Atlanta. Yep,
Atlanta, right.
So this is part of the scene as this music scene and culturally where everything sort of intersect. Well, the first time that I heard something from them was the Elevators track. And then it was the video, like you said, Kyle. Well, first of all, the thing that catches you about Elevators is just that knock, that knock snare sound. And then just the tones, the bass tones in the background, that vocal sample. And it's just like, okay, like this is something like literally, hey, turn that up real quick, and that's what caught me. The video, again, this is at the point where I think we're OutKast. When you saw what the videos were in Southern Playalistic were very, minimalistic, very played down. They were just like kids from Atlanta, and they were showing where they were from. Well, at this point, it was like, y'all know where we from. And as a matter of fact, in the song, they tell you right where they're from. On Headland and Delow. I mean, you know exactly where this all started, And but you started getting into things which became a theme in OutKast, their videos later on, how they started developing artistically in the direction of the things visually, what they were starting to do. But then you take that and it translate into the music too. So then I'm hyped because I love this song. It burned up the airwaves in DC. It burned up 93.9, 95.5, like every night. And by the middle of August, it was #1 on the charts, like at least every like a week long on the top 5 at 5, the top 7 at 7, wherever. It was #1. It was #1. And then the album comes out. And then to make it even worse, a go-go band actually remixed this. And when I mean not like covered it, I'm talking about they took the vocals from this in the instrumental track without the drums and put some congos over it, like a socket beat. So that took the mythology of that from folks from us from DC and took it all the way up to level 10. But then the album came out and then you sit down with it. And it's like, wow, this is like, you sit and you listen to the tracks that are on here and you go through the different ones. And it wasn't just the singles. It was like going through these album tracks, like just being able to hit in your head, like with Two Dope Boys and a Cadillac off the top. You know, then to come back and be able to hear something that makes you think, like Babylon, and then to close it on something like the 13th Floor. I mean, so it gave you a little bit of everything. Really, what you saw was the growth, and then we didn't really know it. At least I didn't. That what I was seeing from them was the evolution from what was two kids from Atlanta who were really hungry to get on to almost veterans in this game, or were striving to become veterans, were looking to establish themselves as the top in the game. And the production, I mean, even me not even knowing that they had produced some of these tracks themselves, but it was just almost like, you know, like that comic book that you get, and then you get the next comic book in the series and you're looking to see what happens next. So then you keep turning the pages and turning the pages and turning the pages, and you're blown away by what the next edition had. This is what this album did for me. I was blown away. Completely blown away. And then by the time I got into school, like, this was one of the, I think, 2 or 3 CDs that we played throughout that fall, you know, including like that Aaliyah's One in a Million, and including an album we'll do later on, because of course what happened with Tupac was Machiavelli. So it became a heavy album in the rotation that played all the way through that fall and all the way through the rest of that school year, because of all the singles that came out, and then because just how great the album was. So, I mean, just incredible, man. And to me, this is what made me be like, okay, like, these cats done put out 2 in a row now. Like, ain't no telling what they can do from here on out. It's no telling what they can do from here on out. And I remember when I went to go pick this up, I went with my sister, and she wasn't really into hip hop like that. And I went to go get it. And then I was like, yeah, yo, here it is. And she looked at it. She was like, this isn't an album. She was like, you sure this isn't something like related to a comic book or something? I said, no, it's ATLiens. This is the album. I said, listen, in the source, that's what they said the name of the album was. I said, when you see the video, you see on the third line in MTV, this is what the name of the album is. It's ATLiens. This is it. She was like, that's a weird looking cover. I'm like, yeah. I said, but it's creative though, right? It looks nice. I'm like, let's go. I want to hear it. So took it, man. Like I said, like you, I had headphones on. And I was in like for an hour, you know, locked in, and I didn't regret it, not a single minute. And every time I sit down to listen to this, I have to take an hour to get through the whole thing. So, oh yeah, absolutely, man. So blown away. So now, man, we get into highlights. So let's get into your highlights, Kyle. What you think? You know, what your highlights are? Any lowlights if you have them, and then anything in particular that you want to note, man. Whether it's something related to a song, production, or anything else.
Man, I think you said a mouthful, man. I just want to piggyback on something that you said that really didn't resonate with me at the time, because obviously we didn't have social media or the internet. To hear that it got major play on a radio station in DC is, I mean, that's mind-boggling, because, you know, Southernplayaistic got them booed, well, them winning the Source Award for Best Newcomer, which they should have won anyway. I mean, Biggie had like four awards that night. Yeah. And, you know, obviously the pro New York crowd ends up, you know, booing OutKast. But to hear them get that kind of love, and again, I was in college, so I wasn't, I didn't know that they were getting love like that. So that's major, man. I never, it's something, I guess when I think about it, it probably makes sense that they would get a lot of love in DC, but just to hear that, that's crazy. Yeah. Let me see, highlights, man. This album starts at a couple of levels, and then it just kind of takes off. Like, Two Dope Boys in a Cadillac, obviously, I think is like one of my favorite songs on the album. And then just to hear that and hear them going back and forth. And then I think as I'm listening to that song, I realized, like, these ain't the same dudes. Like, you can tell there's a difference between the end of Southernplayaisticadillacmuzik and the beginning of ATLiens. And, you know, like you mentioned earlier, you know, they're both personally gone through some things, and they were becoming young men. And so I think, to my point that I was making earlier about, where the video and the visuals kind of made some people take a step back, when people started hearing this album, particularly the young men in the South, I'll put it like that, there were some that could identify with the weed smoking and the drinking on Southernplayaisticadillacmuzik. And then you get this album, you open it up and you look at a comic book, and Dre has on a turban. And then you see the first video, and Dre has on a turban. And it's funny, B, I kid you not.
Hey.
The first week after this album came out, or not, I'll put it like this, maybe 2 weeks after the video dropped, I went to a club, and there were 3 dudes in the club with turbans on. I mean, that goes to show you the influence of Andre 3000, even when he wasn't even trying.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, so it was some people, and not a lot, but I heard some rumblings of some cats that were just like, man, what this don't sound the same like Southern Play. Well, it's not supposed to. And what we had was growth, and then you touched on it a little earlier. Their dabble in production really changed stuff, and it wasn't until I listened to the album, and as I was going through the liner notes, and I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't sampled, this is live instrumentation. Like, that blew me away. I was like, because there was nobody bringing a band or artists in to record and just making funky shit. I don't want to say nobody, but it wasn't a lot of people that were doing it, not at that particular time. Definitely not hip-hop MCs from the South. Maybe UGK, but that's about it. But the album, like I said, just takes off from there. My favorite song on the album, Wheels of Steel, love that joint because of the scratching. Anytime you can put scratching in a record, I'm with it.
Nice.
But it takes off, and it doesn't, there's no lull in this album, in my opinion. Everything, I don't want to sound cliche, but everything is a highlight. Like, you could just put this on and put it on random shuffle and be good with any song that comes up.
Yeah.
This is OutKast's, national coming out party, if you will. I think for those of us who were in the South, we knew, or if you were a fan of OutKast at the time, you knew, but this was their breakout for everybody else to see who they were and who they were trying to become. And, I said it on my podcast before, like, they really represented us as Southern, because at one point in time in hip hop, especially early in hip hop, it wasn't cool to be from the South. Yeah. I mean, you got, we would call Bamas and
Bamas, yes.
And, country or whatever. You talk funny, and they made us proud to be from the South. And the thing was that the knock was that Southern rap was always associated with booty shake, which is nothing wrong with booty shake. You know what I'm saying? I'm a fan of booty shake in a club when I'm dancing. It's not something I'm gonna sit and listen to, but at the same time, they brought lyricism, and this album, a long way of answering your question, everything's a highlight for me. I think Big Boi's verse on Mainstream, I think that might be his best verse on the album. Or at least I'll put it like, this is my favorite verse of Big Boi's on the album. But there are no misses. Even Extraterrestrial, it took me a minute to kind of warm up to that, but it's still a dope song. Like, there's no skips for me on this album. Yeah. This is a very complete package, and I think, whatever they intended to do with this album, they did it and exceeded. And I think, from record sales, if I'm not mistaken, Southern Playalistic sold like 1 million, and I think this sold like 1.5 or maybe 2 million. So they got progressively better with their numbers. And, just to piggyback off something you said, there are no OutKast album, no two OutKast albums sound the same.
Nope, absolutely not.
So, so they started that trend with this album, and it's, like I said, man, nothing but highs, no lows for me on this one.
Indeed. Yeah. I mean, Big Boi said it, man. Like, when they came up, it's literally, he said, in the Cadillac, they went from calling us players balls to ballers, putting the South on the map like we was Little Rock to banging. Niggas said motherfucking playing, they paying, Paying. So it's like, they called us, went from players balls to ballers. I mean, that was the come up was real. the come up was real for them, man. They really, as you said, I mean, there were lots of artists in the South that had success, but to me, I say that the true rise of the South as far as being accepted commercially, so many different other places, man, started with OutKast. And I mean, no disrespect to Ghetto Boys or to anybody in Texas, or anybody in Louisiana, or Luke and 2 Live Crew, or anybody like that. But to me, man, that's really when I think folks started to look at. And then, like you said, it wasn't like a gimmick or anything like that. It was like, yo, these dudes, they really got some bars and they can spit. And not only that, but these producers can make some music. You know, you're absolutely right, man. Highlights. So, like you said, man, there's not really slow down in this album at all, man. 2 Dope Boys in the Cadillac. I mean, to be able to have that as your opening track, like for you to hit people right, in them with it. I mean, just to be able to hit them, I mean, just right out the gate with something like this. You know, and then to have a track like ATLiens be your second single, and that hook, which everybody knows, which you think about it, and if you read it, it might seem a little corny to you, but when you put it in the song, it's like, that hook is the shit. I mean, it's, you know, and there's some down south Atlanta type shit that if you know some down south shit, it makes perfect sense to you. But that is a jam, man. Awesome. The whole thing with Wheels and Steel. This is just the big thing that I think everyone needs to know. Big Boi and Dre, before anything else, they were hip hop fans. They were big hip hop fans, especially Dre himself, man. And so this is just, I think, to them, just paying homage to the beginnings of hip hop and mixing and scratching, like you said, crazy scratching on there. Shout outs to Mr. DJ as well. But then you pick up into stuff like that, man, with Jazzy Bell, which is just again another incredible track, and to me one of the best tracks on here, produced by Organized Noize. Elevator speaks for itself, but when you get into the nitty gritty though, and tracks like Babylon, and really like, you know, the message that's in Babylon, and tracks like Mainstream and Decatur Psalm and Millennium, and then to, you know, really even take that into tracks even like Extraterrestrial, like you said, takes a little bit of maybe of getting used to, but you know, the messages in these songs and the way that they, like you said, they changed. It was like you listening to Andre. Andre sounds a lot more animated on Southernplayaistic. On this, he's even keel. I mean, it's almost like he's just like, you know, I'm delivering this message to you and I'm me to get it out in the same voice. No matter what it is, you're going to listen to what I'm saying. You know, you're not going to listen to how I'm saying it. You're going to listen to what I'm saying. And he was a lot more controlled, I think, on this. And even Big Boi, the way that he had evolved, he was, I think, a much better MC on this. Like, Big Boi to me is somebody that, you know, everybody will give, you know, Dre 3,000 his props because, you know, but I always tell people Big Boi improved with every single OutKast album that came out. You know, he only got better. He only got better.
To show you how easy it is to file a claim with Geico, we hired a nature show host.
In the native habitat of a suburban driveway, the poor victim of a broken windshield is left assessing his vehicle, utterly helpless.
Well, not true. If he's got Geico, he can file a claim online, over the phone, or with his handy mobile app.
But like a lone gazelle, he'll suddenly be left to fend for himself, awaiting his terrible fate.
Nope. Geico will assign him a designated claims team to help him out, too.
So the gazelle gets his car fixed and everything. Wow, nature is so cool.
Geico. Great service without all the drama.
You're a small business. You work hard, but you don't have a huge marketing budget, and you're always looking for new ways to find customers. Have you ever thought about audio? You're listening to an ad right now, aren't you? Introducing AudioGo, a new online platform that lets you run ads on the top podcast and digital radio stations. Don't have a radio ad? We'll make one for you. Sign up for free today at audiogo.com. AudioGo, audio advertising made simple.
But to go through like those little tracks, like those, you know, Wailing and Mainstream and Decatur Psalm, Millennium. I mean, incredible album tracks, things that will never see the light of day on a radio station or you'll see a video for. But just incredible production. And then to be able to bring the whole team on. This is the first time that I had heard Witch Doctor on something. I mean, this is the first time that I remember hearing him. And Witch Doctor was one of the Dungeon family members that put out, that SWAT, a healing ritual,
yes,
in '98, which is an underground slept on classic to me.
Yes.
But then bringing in Goody Mob and Cool Breeze, who we would all come to know within a couple of years, man. The whole team sort of got on. The thing that I respected about OutKast and with the Dungeon family is that everybody got a chance to contribute. Everybody got a chance to be a part of the effort. And that's, to me, why I think they were so successful. But you put this in and you ride, man. Organized Noize still did their thing. At this point, they were still producing for OutKast, still producing for Goody Mob, but they were on their way to heading on and getting their recording deal and their production deal with Interscope. So they were ceding some of the creative control to OutKast as they produced everything on Southernplayaistic. Dre wanted to dabble in producing. Big Boi wanted to do the same, so they let them do it. And it's a decision that really paid off because as the albums went on, OutKast got more involved in the production, and it paid off handsomely in their releases that followed after this, man. So no lowlights, obviously, man. Just incredible production. The titles of these tracks is something that I wrote down. OutKast is very intentional about a lot of the album the choices for the songs that they have on their albums and the meanings that are behind them. Sometimes they're simple, but then sometimes it's like, it'll stop and make you think, especially when you listen to the lyrics and what's being said in those songs. I mean, everything from, if you look at Aquemini with Liberation, a song like Rosa Parks, even the song itself, Aquemini, I mean, it's great. I could talk about this album forever, and especially the production, but we're not going to get into that. Now I want to get into the fun part and our notable quotables. So you mentioned something about a verse earlier, man. Do you have a notable quotable that you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, man. There are quite a few. Yeah. But I always go back to Big Boi's verse on Mainstream. Just his flow. His flow, and I think, again, like you said, Big Boi has gotten to a point where he's even now where he's still rapping, where he's just getting better and better. He does not have the acclaim, I guess, if you will, from people, but people who know that Big Boi can rhyme.
Absolutely.
And I mean, like, he's not overshadowed by Dre on any of these songs. He's not bodied by Dre on any of these songs. They are truly a great compliment to each other, in spite of the differences. And you saw where on Southernplayaistic, they were probably, I think they're maybe a year apart in age, but they probably were closer as far as like as far as doing the same stuff, because they were probably doing like smoking, drinking, partying, whatever the case may be. But on this album, like you mentioned earlier, Big Boi's become a father. Dre's in this relationship, and their life experiences, and Dre becomes a vegan. So, and I remember hearing a story where when they went to tour for this album, like they weren't even on the same tour bus anymore. Like Dre had his tour bus, Big Boi now on the Big Boi tour bus.
Yeah. You already know.
Anything goes, but a Dre tour bus, you got sage and, incense and people chanting and stuff. And there's not a whole bunch of women on there. Big Boi ain't no telling what's going on over there. So just to hear their differences. But yeah, my notable quotable is Big Boi's verse on Mainstream, man. I love that. I mean, like, but even in trying to pick a notable quote, to be honest, I probably could pick like 4 other songs. I mean, because they don't waste any time with their verses. They are very deliberate. They're very intentional. And I think what they do is, on each of these songs, is that they give you a little nugget on something, and it might not be something really, really deep, but they want you to think about something, and it never comes off as preachy. Like I remember one day I was just riding in the car, man, and this came on, and I was listening to Decatur Psalm, and it's funny because like at one point in time, like when I moved to Atlanta in 97. So I moved a year after this album dropped. And I just happened to I was living in Decatur. And I was listening to the hook, It Won't Be Over Till That Big Girl from Decatur singing. I started, and so you hear the choir in the background. So I started thinking about church, and I was like, you know what? It's about 1 million churches in Decatur, you know? And so it's like, it's something subtle. It's something that you don't really think about, but it's like you said, they're very intentional without being, you know, preachy or anything like that. But I thought that was like, it's out, man, I just happened to be sitting at a light, like, damn, it's a lot of churches in Decatur. I wonder if this is why they said that, you know, like that. So, and, you know, and trust me, if you go to any church in Decatur, it's going to be some big girl in there singing
singing her tail off.
Right. So yeah, man, that would be my notable quotable, man. Big Boi's verse on Mainstream.
Nice. Cool. Well, my notable quotable actually comes from Dre.
Okay.
On 13th Floor. And you know what he says on that, and it's like the verse itself, man, just, you know, I bet you never heard of a player with no game, told the truth to get what I want, but I shot it with no shame. Take this music that's serious while others entertain. I see them making paper, so I guess I can't complain. Or can I? I feel they're disrespecting the whole thing. Them hooks like selling dopes to black folks, and I choke when their food they serve ain't tasting right. My stomach can't digest it even when I bless it. I'm confessing one more lesson from the South. We in the house tonight. Now, Hootie, who wants to pose? I suppose we rose through the headland and the low. Well, me and my niggas surpassed the flow and got down for ours like hind catchers. My mind catches flashbacks to the black past where my close niggas laugh at. The southern slang, figure ways and mojo chicken wings. I grew up on booty shake. We did not know no better thing. So go ahead and diss it while real hip hoppers listen. Started by African Bambaataa, so you and your partner gather your thoughts. So that goes back to that whole thing when you talk about the South and what people thought about the South. While my close niggas laugh at, people laughed at their southern slang and how they talked and everything about their lifestyle. They thought that the South was all booty music and it was all shit like Luke and bass and everything else. Right. And he said, we did not know no better thing. So go ahead and diss it while real hip hoppers listen. I mean, come on.
Thanks.
You know, Dre to me at that time, man, from that Southernplayaistic, I would say, man, even all the way up until Aquemini, always had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, man. You can definitely hear it in each one of those albums where he has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, where he feels like he has something to prove. Like in Southernplayaistic, he was trying to prove himself to the world. I think in this, he was trying to prove himself to hip hop. And in Aquemini, I feel like he was trying to prove like he still had it. You know, that he hadn't gone crazy, he hadn't gone soft, even though, you know, he was wearing like, you know, polka dot pants and you know, and pink ascots, and you know, he was all that stuff, you know. But the dude, man, definitely, I always felt like he had a chip on his shoulder, and this is something here that just speaks to me, and just the things that he put in there, the fact that he says my stomach can't digest it even when I bless it. Speaking about, you know, changing his diet. And, you know, the food that they serving ain't tasting right, you know, and it's just like, I mean, all those little gems that he just drops in these verses. And Dre has always been great at doing that. Yeah.
Not to cut you off, you know what's funny?
Yeah.
Like when he said Mojo Chicken Wings, I didn't know what that meant until I moved here. Like that was a place where they served chicken wings. I was like, okay, so now, Mojo, okay, that's what. I mean, like you said, man, it's just little gems like that, man.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you got me so hyped, I forgot to even recite my verse, man. Y'all can look it up, Mainstream, but
Mainstream.
I'm so geeked up talking about this. I totally forgot to spit my verse. My bad.
Man, it's all good, man. It's all good. They can look it up. You know what I'm saying? Go look up the lyrics. They everywhere now. Shoot. Before it used to be only one place you can get lyrics. That was ohhla.com. And now you can get them.
Yes, that was my spot.
And now you can get them everywhere. They got 1,000,001 lyric sites out there. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I mean, there's tons of quotables on here, man. Another one to me is I love both of their verses on Millennium, you know, and I mean, they really had grown at this point, man. You could definitely tell, man, as MCs, they both took a step up. Even Big Boi, he was still on some like, you know, pimp and player stuff, but he had some more substance behind what he was saying. Mm-hmm. They both had substance behind what they were saying, but Dre was definitely in a mode where he wasn't playing any type of games, and he was going to make sure that he was going to drop some gems for you. So even if the song was something like an ATLiens or even something like Jazzy Bell, he was going to make sure he was going to drop some gems for you, man. So just to sort of talk about this, man, and you mentioned it briefly in the beginning, when people talk about OutKast's catalog, and we mentioned, of course, the first three off the top, the Southernplayaistic, the ATLiens and the Aquemini. And then you said there's a lot of people that sort of have this discussion about between ATLiens and Aquemini, which one is better. Now, I always say that this is one of the toughest conversations to have because there's not a lot of people. There's only a few groups and even artists that you can have this conversation where you can have such a debate around either one or two or three albums to decide which one is better, what order you gonna put them in. I mean, Tribe is one of those artists.
Facts.
You know, Jay-Z is one of those artists. You could talk even a little bit about, some folks will do that with Tupac. Some folks will do that with Public Enemy, though I think Public Enemy is a little bit more clear as what's on the top at their catalog. You know, Ice Cube is another one. So there are some artists that you have that ability, but OutKast are one of them, man. So, okay, so this is going to be a little bit of an offbeat question. If you were going to make an argument for this to be on top of their catalog, what argument do you make? You know, what is your argument? Like if somebody comes to tell you like, yo, you believe this is the best one, tell me why. You know, and this is just hypothetical because, you know, not saying that you do.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
That is a great way to form that question because I actually think Aquemini is slightly better.
Yeah.
But we'll keep it here. But I would probably say one, you have to measure it by context first and foremost, because sometimes, and you and I we're both on the internet, a lot of times when you're having this debate and stuff like that with people on social media, it's hard for them to, particularly if they weren't there or around at that particular time, you know, you don't know the impact. Now you can look at album sales and all this stuff like that, but you don't know the impact of, like I said, like you mentioned earlier, OutKast getting major airplay every day on a DC radio station. That didn't happen on Southernplayaisticadillacmuzik.
Yeah.
So for it to happen on Aquemini, it had to have happened on, you know, ATLiens first. So ATLiens in a way opened the door for the national and global acceptance of Aquemini. Yeah. So I would probably say to make a case for it, you really have to go kind of song by song. And I might say that ATLiens is a little bit funkier. Just a little bit.
Okay.
Aquemini probably has more range as far as its sound. And I think you might have Dre and Big Boi at their rapping peaks at that particular time, because at that point when we heard Aquemini, I think, because you correct me if I'm wrong, ATLiens got 4.5 mics, right, in the source?
ATLiens got 4 actually. So
4. Wow. So Southern Playalistic, I think, got 4.5.
That got 4.5. That got 4.5.
Okay, so it got 4.5. This one got 4. And so when they went into the studio, they felt really disrespected by the source as far as the mics were concerned.
Yeah.
And Big Boi even mentioned it in the song, in the Rosa Parks joint. So I think, I don't know, man. I think you got peak Big Boi and peak Dre on Aquemini, but this album right here, man, ATLiens, it did so much, and it really showed the growth and maturity of Dre and Big Boi, and it really showed that they were drawing a line in the sand and really putting Atlanta on their back. I mean, because like you mentioned earlier, at that particular time, like I said, I was in college, but I was about to move here. If you don't have Southern Playalisticadillacmuzik, if you don't have ATLiens, for sure, Atlanta's dominance, if you will, in hip hop over these last 20 plus years doesn't happen. There's no way it does. It doesn't even come close. Atlanta's a blip in hip hop history if this album does not get made the way that it does. So on that reason alone, I would put ATLiens over Aquemini and say it was better, because it was the one that virtually kicked the door down, because there were doors that were closed for Southern Playalistic in spite of, you know, Players Ball and, you know, the tracks that they had that they were released, like Get Up, Get Out. But between the album, between the visuals, they literally put, because there was nobody else really from Atlanta Atlanta artists at that particular time, particularly the hip hop artists, they were really popular locally. They did, outside of Atlanta and outside of Georgia, they weren't really that popular. So going back to something you said earlier, Atlanta was known for at that particular time was LaFace Records. So it was a label started and created by L.A. Reid and Babyface. Well, those are R&B guys.
They ain't know nothing about hip hop. Yeah.
Right. Right. So I don't even think the city had a hip hop station at the time. So
wow.
So there was a lot riding on this album. And of course, they didn't know it at the time, but to answer your question, I think you make the case for ATLiens because this was the one. This was the one that blew the doors down and not only opened it up for Atlanta, but subsequently opened it up for Atlanta and the rest of the South. If you don't have this album, then the South never takes over.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Now, I think that's a great argument. And I think you could make the argument that without this, you're not getting something like you're not getting a Ludacris, you're not getting a T.I., you're not even getting, I even think, even a Gucci or a Jeezy without stuff like this, man. Without having Organized Noize be who they are, I don't think you're getting even these producers from Atlanta like Shawty Red and Metro Boomin even now. Like, I think, like, to me, this is I would have to say, if I have to make it an equivalent to another group's discography, to me this is like their version of Public Enemy's Fear of a Black Planet. I think this is everybody knows when you talk about Public Enemy, their best album, the one that everybody talks about, which is depending on who you talk to, and a lot of people, especially of a certain age, will say the greatest hip hop album of all time is It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. But what I remember Chuck D saying about Fear of a Black Planet, he says It Takes a Nation was more of our nation building album. He said Fear of a Black Planet was our global album. That's the album that introduced the world to Public Enemy, And if there was an album that introduced the world to OutKast, it was ATLiens. And just the impact that you talk about what it did for Atlanta hip hop. I mean, this really, like you said, kicked down the door. Because when you head into late 90s, into the 2000s, I mean, at this point in time, Dre and Big Boi are veterans and have proven themselves, but what are right behind them, and not just with the Dungeon family, but then also the Dungeon family, the next generation of them, and then also these other artists that follow. You get those Ludacris's, you get those T.I.'s, you get those Jeezys, you get those Gucci's. You get, all these different artists from Atlanta that are starting to emerge that become huge. And then everybody from Atlanta has a seat at the table now, Right. You can give even credit to JD for doing what he did, man. But even I would say him having to do the work that he did, I think that JD even benefited from Atlanta blowing up like that, because then it made him, even though he was a big player, it made him even bigger player in the game later on in the decade heading into the 2000s. So, labels like So Def benefited from what they were able to do at LaFace. You know what I'm saying? And vice versa. They would have been able to benefit from each other. They really kind of worked hand in hand. So what I say, though, is that's my case to it, is that this is the album that introduced OutKast to the world. The world, Craig, So
yeah, you're right, man. And it was one of those albums where, like I said, I was about to graduate from South Carolina State University. I knew once I graduated, I was going to wait a while, and then ultimately my destination was Atlanta.
Nice.
And it was because, of a group like OutKast and an album like this made it cool to be in Atlanta. They named the album ATLiens.
ATLiens, yeah.
And at that particular time, the Atlanta had just, like you said, it just had the Olympics in 1996. And so there was an influx of people coming. And then obviously you had, the world-renowned Freaknik, and which I was a part of. And, so it was like it was the place to be. So it was a place much like, growing up in DC, place where if you were young, if you were black, you wanted to be, because you could see people that looked like yourself that were making money and was going to have you had a pretty good chance of having a pretty decent lifestyle. I'll be honest now, when I moved here in 97, I didn't know that I'd, be here I've lived here longer than I've lived any other place. So this is home.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's that album, and I remember even just, hearing songs where they're shouting out these streets, And it's like one day you just driving on the street, and next thing you know, you're actually on the street. It's like, oh, so this is Headland and Delow. Wow, okay,
Yep.
I didn't know this. I didn't know this, where this was, because it doesn't. They don't say where it is, but I mean, if you're from here, you know where it is. This album made you want to be in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And like I said, if this album doesn't get made, if OutKast doesn't take it to the next level, then our cities, it never becomes what I think it ultimately became.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've talked to a lot of people who are now living in Atlanta who, came from, places like Chattanooga, and came from Savannah, and came from Jacksonville, and came from Birmingham, and, came from Jackson, that they all wanted to make it to one of a couple of places. It was either New Orleans or Atlanta. And Atlanta was a big place to be at that particular time. And so there was an influx of people that led to another influx of people, because Atlanta became a it and happening spot to be at. And I think this album takes a big part of the credit, because of OutKast and because of this album.
No question.
So awesome, man. Well, Kyle, we get to the end, man. You know what it is. We get to the test of time to see what we think it is. Do we think it's a certified classic, borderline classic, a classic just in its time, or not a classic at all? And give that a rating of 7 to 10. 7, we don't feel as strongly about it, and 10, we feel very strongly about it. So, what's up? What you say?
Man, this is a certified classic. I feel 10 out of 10. This is a certified classic. This album, I think, it not only has stood the test of time, but it is one of those albums which, in what I think a classic should be, and you guys talk about this each week, where it not only gets better with time, but you're able to take something from the album each time that you listen to it, maybe that you didn't hear. Maybe it could be something as simple as hearing a snare or a kick drum that you didn't hear, and you've been hearing this album for 25 years, but now all of a sudden, okay, is the snare on this particular song? Oh, wow, I never heard that before. Because this particular day you're listening to it and you got your AirPods in, and it's more, the sound is more pronounced.
Yeah.
Or it might be a verse or something that Big Boi or Dre said that, maybe flew over your head because, like you said, you were younger then. So now you've experienced life a little bit more. Oh, I know what he's talking about when he says that.
Yeah.
This album, man, I think it still resonates with so many people. It don't take much to, if you mention it on social media, somebody's going to say, Aquemini, and then it's going to be a battle back and forth, much like, Tribe does with, Low End Theory and
Marauders. Yeah.
So, you have fans. I mean, like, I've had people tell me straight up, like, they'll say, oh, this is a 5 mic album. Aquemini is 4.5. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. But hey, I think they're both 5 mic albums. But this album, I think they did what they set out to do and exceeded expectations because, again, this is their sophomore album. Yeah. This is their sophomore album. And you go from, and I want to reiterate a point that you hit on earlier, Organized Noize, which was, they were becoming legends at the time, at this particular time. They had their hand in and all over their first album, Southernplayaisticadillacmuzik. And so the sophomore album comes, and, naturally groups want to, people want to still stick with the same format. Well, Organized Noize kind of stepped back a little bit and let OutKast, kind of find their way, with them and DJ, Mr. DJ, and they form Earth Tone.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't happen a lot in music, period. It definitely doesn't happen a lot in hip hop. So for them to kind of step back and let, Dre and Big Boi do their thing says even more about what they felt and how confident they were that this album was going to deliver. And it did. But yeah, I think it definitely stands the test of time. It's amazing that it's 25 years old. I feel old now.
Yeah.
But
right.
But yeah, man, it's definitely a certified classic. I think it's one of those albums, man, that you mentioned, the Public Enemies, and it's in that, it's up there with those albums. Those certified classic, all-time classics. I think you can make a strong case that you could put this album up there with those, golden era classics, and it fit. And I think, people, when they sit and listen to this album and realize that it's been 25 years and it doesn't sound old, it doesn't sound dated, None of the stuff that they're talking about is old stuff.
Yeah.
They'll be surprised.
Absolutely. Certified classic, 10 out of 10. It's not even a question. This is 2 out of at least 3 for OutKast. Everybody who's heard me knows that I think that there is an argument to be made that you could argue that the first 5 projects that OutKast have come out are all classic. There's an argument. Now, there's no question whatsoever to me about the first 3. About Southernplayaistic, ATLiens, and Equimni. All classics. Certified without a shadow of a doubt. Shut the front door. Go tell your mama. Those type of things. Like, that's without a doubt. When it comes to Stankonia, some people will be like, that's their okay. This is dope, but I don't know, like the bar was too high from the first 3, but this is still dope. But there's an argument to be made for that. I mean, speak about Love Below from a certain perspective. Yeah, we would have preferred that to have been the 2 of them together. Right. But it was what it was. I mean, but that still is an incredible album. And then let's not even talk about Idlewild. I mean, that's anyway. But there's an argument to be made.
You make a great point. Yeah. You can actually make that case.
Yeah, you could make the case, and I don't think that you would get a big argument from a lot of people. To me, I say when it comes to hip hop groups, there's like a handful that you could take their catalog and put it up against them. I did a tail of the tape between OutKast and Tribe. And to me, the only clear winners I really had only for Tribe were Low End Theory, and that was the only one. And that was going up against this. Now, if that won against this, that tells you how good I feel about the Low End Theory. This is still an incredible album. But there are not many groups that you could take their catalog, match it up against anybody, and say they win for sure. I mean, we're talking about Gangstar. We're talking about EPMD. You're talking about Public Enemy, Tribe Called Quest, Wu-Tang. Any one of those groups, you could take them, and OutKast matches up pretty damn well. They really do. And this is 2 of 3 for me. And this album, like I said, introduced OutKast to the world. If it got played everywhere from radio stations in DC down to radio stations in Atlanta and Savannah to probably as far west as Dallas or maybe even California, and they even praise it now in places like Germany and Switzerland and anywhere else you could think about where hip hop is big. This is a staple and an album that if you're on Twitterverse and you're on a part of hip hop Twitter, people love this album, bro. And that just tells you about how it stands the test of time 25 years later, that people are still talking about it. And people love talking about this album, like a way that I've seen very few albums talked about on hip hop Twitter, man. So yeah, this is it. This is it. OutKast, ATLiens, 25 years ago. Also released is a anniversary reissue, including vinyl. They have 4-part vinyl reissue for ATLiens, and I saw somebody that had it. They had a picture of it on Instagram, and it looks really, really dope. If I had a functioning record player, I would have it, and I would spend some money on it. I definitely would. So make sure y'all go check it out, man. Wherever you can find music, make sure that you go listen to it, reminisce, man, about those tracks, man, and just let us know what you think about it. Obviously, man, it's a great piece of work, and 25 years later, still very relevant and still sounds as fresh as it did the day when it came out. So, Kyle, man, we always want to thank you for coming on, brother. It's always a blast talking hip-hop. Man, as always, we want to make sure that we give you a chance to shout out your platform, social media handles, and anything special that you're working on that you want us to look out for.
Oh, no doubt, man. Again, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it, man. This is it's always fun, man, and I enjoy listening to you and the fellas. It's always an adventure trying to figure out who's gonna not like something or whatever.
Yeah,
man. But I love the authenticity of the podcast, and I'm always shouting y'all out and stuff, man. So I appreciate the opportunity to come on here. You guys can check me out, 12 Kyle Podcast. The podcast drops every Thursday, so make sure that you subscribe. Sometimes from time to time I'll drop bonus episodes on Sundays. So make sure that you subscribe to the 12 Kyle Podcast. You can find it on any DSP. We're on them all. So, just find one and subscribe from there. You can hit me up on social media at 12 Kyle across the board, Twitter, Facebook, and IG.
Yeah. There you go. 12 Cal podcast each and every Thursday. And make sure you're checking out those bonus episodes. We're going to be making sure that we're tuned in to episode 301, man. Kyle always shows love to the show. We make sure that we show love back, man. So appreciate it, Kyle. We're going to be looking out for all the stuff that's coming out, man. We know you got some dope content coming up.
Oh, no doubt.
And that is going to wrap up yet another edition of The Vault. Please make sure you check us out on our new host on Red Circle. You can also download, stream, and subscribe to The Vault Classic Music Reviews on any one of our streaming sources. If you go to the link in any one of our social media pages in the bio, you'll find our link tree. There you'll find all of our streaming sources and as well all of our social media pages. Again, you can follow The Vault on @VaultCMR Podcast on Instagram, @Vault Classic on Twitter, and on Facebook and YouTube. You can search The Vault Classic Music Reviews Podcast, like the Facebook page, subscribe to the YouTube channel, interact with us on social media. Let us know what you think. We do it here all for you. We appreciate the support, and if you have a friend, tell a friend, and make sure that that friend tells a friend. Always remember to keep your headphones on and your music loud, but not too loud. And as we close, we like to remind everyone to dream big, because dreams are the basis for creation. Always create, motivate, and elevate, because you were never destined or created to stay stationary in this life. And on that note, we say peace.
Thank you for listening and coming into The Vault. Please subscribe and follow us on Facebook at IV Creative and Instagram at IVECRE8.
Right now at T-Mobile, we're getting rid of the trade-in headache. Switch with our Magenta Max plan and get the epic iPhone 12 with 5G on us, no trade-in required.
Check out this great 4K video. I even posted it with 5G way out here.
A new iPhone 12 on us, no trade-in required. T-Mobile, the leader in 5G.
With 24 monthly bill credits plus tax for well-qualified buyers. Contact us before canceling to continue bill credits or credit stop and balance on required finance agreement due. Up to 2 per account. T-Mobile is the largest 5G network and named fastest by OpenSignal Awards and USA 5G User Experience Report July 2021. Details at T-Mobile.com.
Home. It looks a little different for everyone. For some, it's a rustic cabin. For others, a big city high-rise. And for others, it's renting a tiny studio that said it had laundry in the building, but the dryer's always broken. And don't get me started on the gym. That's not a gym, it's an elliptical machine and a boiler room. And let's not even discuss parking. But no matter where you call home, Geico makes it easy to bundle and save on renters and car insurance. Easier than getting your landlord to return your calls. You can't hide forever, Leonard.